So, a bruising week for the Prime Minister and his party. Let's see what plans they have to address those big issues. Joining me now is the Northern Ireland Secretary, Brandon Lewis. Good morning, Mr. Lewis.
Good morning.
Can we save everybody a bit of time and just agree that you took a major beating in Tiverton and Honiton?
Yeah, there were a bad set of results for us. That does happen sometimes mid-term. There's no denying it was a set of results we've got to look carefully at and learn from.
Your party chairman, Oliver Dowden, resigned in the early hours of Friday morning, saying that somebody has to take responsibility. Prime Minister said again and again that he takes responsibility for everything that happens on his watch. Why is he still there?
Because actually, I think one of the things we've seen in the last couple of days is his zest and his enthusiasm and determination to deliver for the country. We all have responsibility for the elections. You know, we're all members of a party. I was in Wakefield myself. We all are delivering as a government and working to deliver as a government. What we've got to do, as has happened before, where we've seen by-election results go one way and then a following general election go a very different way. You can't extrapolate, as you know, Trevor, a by-election result into a general election result. It's been proven time and again to not work that way. We've got to make sure that we're delivering for people so that come the next general election, they will vote Conservative to allow us to continue to improve our country.
Well, you say that, but 148 backbenchers think he's an albatross around your neck. And that was before last Thursday, and the numbers are probably going to grow now. This man could cost you your majority. And the mission, which we'll no doubt go on to talk about, of all the things you want to do, high productivity, low tax and all of that, why do you stick with Boris Johnson when he could actually be the main obstacle to you achieving the Britain you want?
Well, look, I've actually said before on this show with Sophie and elsewhere that actually I think Boris Johnson is the right person to lead us into the next general election. I think he'll do that successfully. I was also clear just a few weeks ago that those by-elections are going to be difficult by-elections. Let's remember we've got a difficult backdrop in both those seats, why the by-elections came up, let alone where we are with the pressures for people seeing with that global challenge of inflation on the cost of living that people are challenged with, as well as some of the backdrop we have seen within our own party over the last period. So it's no surprise that these were going to be a difficult set of results. What we've got to do, though, is make sure that we are not just learning from those results, where, of course, what we saw was a lot of people who had previously voted Conservative this time stayed home. We've got to make sure by the next general election we're motivating those people to come out and vote for us. I do think Boris Johnson's the person who can do that. He's proven that time and again, where people have written him off, both before London elections and before even the 2019 election. And then we've been able to come back and win successfully. And I think he's got the ability to do that. I think we as a party have got the message and the structure, and we'll have the plans into the next general election to show that we've still got things to do to help improve our country even further. Yeah,
well, some of your colleagues have pleaded with him just at least to change the way he presents himself in public a bit. And, yesterday he's talking about having a third term before anybody's given him a second go. I mean, he's having a laugh, isn't he? And isn't that the sort of thing that really gets people annoyed?
Well, I think you could look at it. Look, I appreciate, obviously, Trevor, the way you've outlined it. But what I see there is somebody, and this is what I see when I work with the Prime Minister every day, whether it's on Northern Ireland-specific issues or as a member of the Cabinet on wider issues, somebody who's got that drive and enthusiasm for what we want to achieve for our country. And I think seeing that kind of zest, and let's be frank, somebody who's enjoying doing the job and wants and has got plans for the country that he wants to deliver, having that ability to look forward, I think it's a good thing. We often get criticised. Let's be frank, we often get criticised in politics that we look short-term, just the next day, the next election, the next vote. Actually, we've got somebody as Prime Minister who wants to be looking long-term at how we structurally improve our country for generations to come. That has got to be a good thing.
All right, well, look, let me put this to you. I mean, you and Oliver Dowden are notoriously seen as the most normal members of the Cabinet, and you've been loyal...
I think I'll take that as a compliment.
It is. You've been loyal to the Prime Minister. Now, 3 years ago, Dowden warned that the Tories face parliamentary extinction in some parts of the country, and he said this in the Times. The Conservative Party is facing an existential threat. We need a leader who can engage everywhere, energetically advocate our cause and win people over. No Conservative is better placed to do this than Boris Johnson. Now, I'd like you to compare that with what he said in his resignation letter sent at 5:30 in the morning on Friday. Our supporters are distressed and disappointed by recent events, and I share their feelings. We cannot carry on with business as usual. Somebody must take responsibility. Dowden used the word extinction, and what he is essentially saying on Friday is that you face an extinction-level event. You can't brush this off.
As I said to you at the top of the programme, look, we've got to be clear about these were a difficult set of results for us. You do get that midterm. We've got to be focused on delivering for people. And I think one of the points the Prime Minister's made over the last few days is correct. Us talking about what's going on inside Westminster within a single party is never a productive thing to do. What I get from my constituents and from people when I talk to them, wherever I happen to be in the country, is they want to see a government that's focused on delivering for them. And let's also remember, Trevor, if you think back even to 2017, where we had a phenomenal set of local election results in a bad general election, you do see differences. And that was only a month between them, let alone the fact that we've had a difficult set of by-elections here. We've got a period of time to the next general election. We've got to be focused on getting things done to make lives better for people, put more money in people's pockets, grow the economy so we have more jobs in the economy, better skilled jobs as well, so we improve productivity. These are all things we can be doing as a country, whilst also playing our part on the world stage.
This is an impressive effort, Mr Lewis, but let me tell you what your colleagues are looking at. They're looking at the Tiverton and Honiton performance and the fact that if it were repeated across the country, several of your cabinet colleagues, including the Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Minister, would be looking for new jobs. Here's who's going to lose their seats. Johnson, Eustace, Sharma, Raab. The real fear for you here must be that the Labour Party and the Liberal Democrats work together and you face a wipeout. Let me put it to you again. Isn't it time, if you really want to protect the Conservatives' mission, get your manifesto pledges done, the person who is standing in the way of that is the Prime Minister?
No, actually, I disagree. And look, at a couple of levels. First of all, most of the people who are calling and making criticisms on the Prime Minister are people who want to see him gone because they want to win an election. The Labour Party, the Liberal Democrats, people who opposed Brexit initially. This is somebody I think is capable of winning a general election, delivering for our country, as he has done in the past. Look, I've been chairman of our party through difficult elections and more successful elections as well. You cannot extrapolate, as you know, a by-election result into a general election result, not least of all, because even if we look at Tiverton, the Liberal Democrat vote in itself went up marginally. What we've got to do is motivate those people who didn't come and vote, who usually would vote for us, to come back and vote for us. That's about delivery.
24,000
Yeah, and as I've said to you, Trevor, I'm not underscoring that's a bad result. What we've got to do is encourage and give a reason to those people in a general election to come back and vote for us. That's about delivering over the next year or two, and then about showing that our plans for the following Parliament are exciting plans to take our country forward. And Boris Johnson's the person who can do that.
All right, before we get on to those exciting plans, let me just have one last bash at that. This Prime Minister says he's now thinking about his third term. Would you have felt happier if he'd said yesterday that, as Tony Blair did, more or less, in 2005, that he wants to be clear that this next election will be the last he will lead the Conservative Party into, and after that, he's gone?
No, and David Cameron did a similar thing. And if you remember, there's a huge amount of furore around that afterwards. What I want is a Prime Minister who is not thinking about the next few months, but is thinking about that long-term change we need in our country.
So you're happy that he'll be going on and on and on, as they say?
Look, I'm very clear. I want our country to have a Conservative-led government for a very, very long time. I want a Prime Minister who's looking at the long term and doing so with enthusiasm and focus. That's what we've got in Boris Johnson, and that's why I support him and will continue to.
All right. Well, look, let me give up on that one to some extent and take the Prime Minister's point that he thinks people are heartily sick of hearing about him, and what they really care about is policy on jobs and cost of living and so on. So let's talk about how you're doing on all of that. Strikes this week. There's probably more coming down the track. Is there any resolution to the rail dispute in sight?
Well, I hope there is. Obviously, this is an issue between the employer and the unions. But I think for people across the country who want to see a resolution to this, people are being disrupted, getting to school, getting to medical appointments, getting to work. That isn't good for the railways even, where we've seen this roughly 25% drop in use of railways through COVID, as people have had, obviously, pressures of COVID and coming back to work and change of how they work. Having further pressure on that, where people start to see the railways as unreliable, is not a good thing for the railway, particularly where we want to encourage people to be using public transport. So I hope we do see an end to this. And I think that's what's in the best interest of the country as well.
You say you hope you want to see an end to it. And your colleagues have been saying this week, the negotiation has nothing really to do with ministers. It's between the employers and the unions. Would it be helpful if there were less colourful language from some of your colleagues? Grant Shapps accused the unions of, I'm quoting here, gunning for a strike called under false pretences. You're trying to turn an industrial dispute into a political showdown, aren't you?
No, but equally, I think it is right that we as government ministers are very clear and give a guide to the public about what we think on these issues that affect them. This is a government, of course, that's investing £96 billion into rail infrastructure. We supported the railways. And actually, all of us, Trevor, you, I and everybody watching this programme, put in support worth about £600 per household into the railways through COVID to keep them going. So I think it's right that we are airing the opinions we hear from our constituents and as a government around why this is the wrong thing to do. We should not be having a strike. We should be seeing this.
But aren't you just giving Mr Mick Lynch, the railway workers' leader, the opportunity to make the point that he constantly makes, that this is really nothing to do with the employers and that the government's ministers are pulling the strings. So every time Mr Shapps gets into it, Mr Lynch smiles and says, tell you who's in charge here, but they won't talk to us.
Well, look, I think you can see that's factually not true. It's the union that's calling the strikes. They're meant to be negotiating with the employers. We as a government are the ones putting this record levels of investment into the railway services and improving it, modernising it. And I think it is right that we're clear with the public. As I say, when we've seen this 25% drop, we're seeing more and more people who do use the railways using them in a way that uses their mobile phones, etc. So you've got some of those ticket offices now issuing less than one ticket an hour. That isn't a way to run a modern railway. And it's right that we're putting the investment in to support that change.
But you're doing it again, you know. You've just done it. You've just started to express a view about what should be a subject of negotiation.
No.
And all that.
What I've just outlined to you is a factual position of where we are with the railways and the development with the railways, and the government's in massive record levels of investment, billions and billions of pounds to improve our railways for people's use in the future. For people to use it, they need to be confident in it. That means it needs to be reliable. That's partly our investment, but it's also the unions making sure that the railways are running and trains can run on time.
All right, there's more coming down the track. British Airways have voted for a strike. Postal workers, teachers, doctors, even barristers. What's your plan? Are you making it clear to everybody you're not going to get inflation rises?
Well, look, we have been very clear. We've got to be very conscious and careful. This is about taxpayers' money and making sure we're not doing things that further drive inflation. If anything, we want to be looking at what we can do to hold and pull inflation back to more reasonable levels. This is a global challenge. We're seeing countries all over the world with these pressures on inflation. We've got to make sure we're not doing things that further drive that, at the same time as recognising that we as a government want to do everything we can to support people. But of course, this is all taxpayer money, and it's right that the Chancellor looks at that very, very carefully.
So to be clear, none of these people is going to get an inflation level pay increase. None of them is going to be in the 7 to 9% range.
Well, there's a whole range of decisions for different sectors, and we saw nurses obviously last year got a pay rise. But look, let's be very clear, Trevor. We're looking at a structure. So, for example, with the RMT and the railway workers, the median wage in that sector is about £44,000. We're seeing train drivers on 56 and even 70,000 with overtime, compared to an average wage of 26,000. I don't think many people will feel barristers are particularly underpaid. I say somebody who qualified as one a long time ago. So I think we've got to be clear about doing what is right for the country as a whole and being careful with and looking carefully at how we spend taxpayers' money.
All right, well, let's look at the country as a whole. Energy costs up, food costs up, taxes up. The increases in pension and wages are about to be wiped out by this double-digit inflation. Where is the good news for the British people in all of that?
Well, these are challenging times. There's no getting away from that.
No, but what are you doing about it? Where's the good news?
No, that's a fair question, Trevor. So this is a challenging period of time. As I say, we're seeing global pressure as we're coming out of COVID, as we're seeing actually the food pressure, particularly from that war in Ukraine. Putin's abhorrent invasion of Ukraine is putting huge pressure on food supplies. And governments all around the world are dealing with this. So what we have been doing is we've been putting a very substantial package of support for people that's worth about £37 billion. So about 8 million of the most vulnerable households in the country are going to have support to around £1,200 this year alone. The Chancellor is obviously carefully looking at this for decisions that he'll be making in the next few months around what more, if anything, we can do and how we do that in a way that really directly helps people, whether it's about keeping the cost of fuel down. And as somebody who represents a part of the country, a lot of my constituents is on oil-fired central heating. I understand that pressure. And we want to do what we can to support people. That's why that £37 billion package of support has already got in, some of which, of course, hasn't quite got to people yet. It's in July, for example, the national insurance threshold change will help people with a reduction in their tax payments.
But as you say, it hasn't got there yet. It isn't getting into people's pockets. There is still the situation where people feel poorer. And it's puzzling. You spent £400 billion plus on COVID, and we know all of that. That everybody kind of agrees that was a good thing to do. It's puzzling you can't find another 10 billion or so to meet some of the pay demands that would help to offset those cost of living increases.
Well, look, that's the balance, the challenge, the decisions the Chancellor has to make. And my economics degrees are a very, very long way behind me now. But look, even I know, Trevor, one of the realities of the challenge, as I say, we've got the national insurance threshold change coming in July. That will see people getting that tax reduction across the country. But what you also find is because of what we've done through COVID, we have got more debt in the country that we've got to manage. And the decision the Chancellor has to make when using taxpayers' money is not putting up debt further that, of course, our children, our grandchildren's generations will then have to pay off, and equally not putting things into the economy that further drive up inflation. We want to see inflation coming down. This is a global challenge. There's no getting away from that. But we also want to be able to make sure we're doing this within our means so that, you know, we can't continue to just print money because that drives not only further inflation, but debt for the future. So there are difficult balances the Chancellor has to make. I think he is doing that in a way that works for people across the country and helps them have ultimately more money in their pocket.
All right. Well, look, obviously the Chancellor is not going to move on this. Let's talk about the dilemma one of your other colleagues faces. You're sending asylum seekers to Rwanda. Polling tells us it is probably quite a popular policy with a lot of people. But you haven't actually managed to ship a single individual to Kigali. Even when people like your policies, you can't actually execute them.
Well, look, one of the things we said, this is always going to be, one of the challenges we have with illegal immigration sometimes is the way our processes work. I was immigration minister for a while myself a few years ago, and I can remember having times where we were trying to deport even foreign national offenders, and at the very last minute, and there's a tactic that some of these people will use where literally as they're on the plane, they will then get the lawyers to go and claim asylum or something. So that doesn't mean they're going to succeed.
Some of these people, Mr. Lewis,
these are people who come here illegally.
Likely to be asylum seekers.
Well, no, these are people who have come here illegally. And in the case I'm talking about, sometimes these are even foreign national offenders where they can run an appeal at the very last moment that means that you have to go back and start again. It doesn't mean they're going to win that appeal. And it is right that we have brought in place a policy, and I think the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister deserve great credit for bringing forward a policy that is actually very clearly seeking to break the business model.
You've got the policy, but you haven't actually done it. And there's no sign you're going to be able to do it.
Well, first, we have brought the policy, and you're quite right. The courts have decided that we've got to go through this process of this appeal. They haven't said that what we've done is wrong, and I'm confident eventually we will see people moving to Rwanda. And it is right, of course, that when people come to this country, they do it in a legal means. It's not people putting people's lives at risk, and importing means that people who are here legally can get the proper support that they need.
OK, look, I'm really trying to find out when you're actually going to get going on doing things. Now, there's an interesting thing...
Well, hold on. So, Trevor, just be clear. We have got going on this. It's not the government that has prevented this flight from going back to Rwanda. That's a court decision.
OK. Let's deal with another issue, which is now the business secretary's business. I understand now that the government is considering putting new tariffs on import and steel. And that will mainly affect some developing countries. Now, this isn't... First of all, is that true? And secondly, if it is true, that's not very friendly to the developing countries who want to export their steel. And for a global Britain, which needs all the friends it can get, it's not very smart foreign policy, is it?
Oh, well, we are a global country. You know, as you've seen, we've been working with partners around the world, not just on Ukraine, but on trade deals as well. And one of the things that the Business Secretary, the Chancellor, the Prime Minister have to look at all times is getting the balance between how we trade with our international partners and also making sure we're giving the best opportunity to UK-based industries and businesses to be able to grow, to be sustainable and to deliver and create security in supply, whether it's for food, whether it's for energy and infrastructure here in this country as well. So, look...
New tariffs on steel could be a possibility.
I'm not saying... Look, I'm not saying they could be, I'm not saying they won't be. I'm saying, as a government, we are always looking at what we do to get the balance right between our international trade, our work with our international partners, and what's right for the UK.
OK, look, let's deal, fine, if I may, with your own territory. Any progress on resolving the differences over the Northern Ireland Protocol yet?
Well, we're going to have the legislation will be brought in for what we call second reading. The debate will be in Parliament tomorrow. The Foreign Secretary and myself will be leading that work through Parliament tomorrow. So, look, I think that is the start of seeing a resolution to the problems around the Northern Ireland Protocol. That is going to resolve the very issues that have been so detrimentally affected.
You're going to resolve it by killing it?
No, we're not, actually. We're very much fixing the problems within the protocol, particularly with the way that the EU have wanted to see it implemented. That has caused substantial problems for businesses in Great Britain not supplying why in Northern Ireland, and businesses and constituencies and communities in Northern Ireland not being able to access the products they need. Even the Jewish community technically can't practice their religion because of the EU's requirements. That's not acceptable.
But you see what the problem is here. I mean, we've been talking about all the things the government says it wants to do, and it feels like, at best, Lord Frost described the Northern Ireland Protocol as unfinished business. You got Brexit done, but you didn't, actually. And your answer to the failure of the policy seems to be to abandon the deal that you yourselves signed. So even where you've won, even where you've got the policy, this government seems to be ready to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. I mean, it's a government in paralysis, isn't it?
Well, two things in that, Trevor. Look, first of all, I think that's a very unfair and a misrepresentation of the reality of the protocol. The problem with the protocol is the way the EU wants to see it implemented. And I think actually as a government, it would be wrong of us to leave a situation in Northern Ireland that isn't working. There is no political leader in any party in Northern Ireland who says the protocol is working. The unionist community in Northern Ireland fundamentally do want the protocol removed. What we are doing is fixing the problems within the protocol about how it's being implemented so that businesses can prosper again, so that people of Northern Ireland, who at the moment, for example, can't even benefit from the Chancellor's decisions on VAT and fuel tax that have helped people across the rest of the UK, we can't implement in Northern Ireland because of the way the protocol works. We've got to fix that for the people of Northern Ireland. And ultimately, I want to see the re-establishment of the Northern Ireland Assembly and the executive. The protocol is getting in the way of that, and that's why it's breaching the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. We've got to resolve that. That's what this legislation will do. But ultimately, we want to do this by agreement with the EU. But to do that, they need to show some flexibility and actually come and negotiate in a flexible way.
You see what the problem is here? I mean, the Prime Minister says, oh, stop talking about me. Let's get on to the things that matter. But on almost everything, and I don't challenge your goodwill on this, but on almost everything you've said to me, yes, we've got plans, yes, it's going to happen, but it's all jam tomorrow, not delivery today. And isn't that the real problem of a Johnson administration, that talks a great game, but we're still to see the results on any of these things, and we haven't even talked about levelling up?
Well, actually, I'll challenge that, Trevor, because what I've talked about today is £96 billion we are investing in our railways. With the £37 billion we have already putting in to support people. And with the Northern Ireland Protocol, it's about actually fixing the issue around what the EU have put in place. We are doing that, and in fact, we'll be in Parliament moving that legislation tomorrow, in the next 24 hours. So we are very much getting on with the job.
Brandon Lewis, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.